My sons are wicked. This is the story of a father who gave everything for his 3 sons. There was a man named James, who married the love of his life, Sandra. James was just 27 and Sandra was 25. He worked as a bank manager at a microfinance institution. Sandra, a talented and respected fashion designer, was heavily pregnant, with triplets, but still actively running her business. Life was good. They lived in Rumuokoro, Port Harcourt. They owned a home, and James even ran a mini supermarket, while Sandra's fashion shop sat right above it on the second floor. But everything changed in the 7th month of Sandra's pregnancy. James lost his job. A large sum of money went missing at the bank, and though innocent, James was accused and fired. Worse still, he was blacklisted. No bank would hire him again. His contacts, his connections, gone. He was desperate, broken. But Sandra never left his side. She stood by him with strength and love, doing all she could to keep their lives afloat. The supermarket still brought in some income, until tragedy struck again. One night, the entire building caught fire. The supermarket gone. Sandra's fashion shop above it gone. Everything burned. Not a single item was saved. It was a heartbreaking moment. Their world crumbled. The shock was too much for everyone. Sandra, overwhelmed by the stress, went into forced labor that same night. They rushed her to the hospital, and the doctors performed an emergency C-section. She gave birth to 3 beautiful boys, and died immediately after. James' world shattered. In just 1 month and a few days, he lost everything. His job, his mini supermarket, and now his beloved wife. The triplets were healthy, but because they were born prematurely, they had to stay in the hospital for at least 3 months. James spent every last naira he had on their care. By the time he brought them home, he was completely broke. His younger sister, Anita, moved in to help take care of the babies. James had no job. He begged for help from friends and former colleagues, but no one answered, except one person, Daniel. Daniel wasn't rich, but he always came around. He gave James little money whenever he could. James deeply appreciated it, even though it wasn't much. Out of desperation, James started doing menial jobs, pushing wheelbarrows at the market, carrying heavy loads for customers, just to put food on the table. He did this for a year. Then he started working as a bricklayer, moving from one uncompleted building to another. Eventually, James sold his house and moved into a small, cramped apartment in a Facemaisi compound in a rough part of town. Despite everything, he was still supporting Anita, who was in the university. He paid her school fees from his bricklaying jobs. Anita also helped herself financially by making hair for people around. She was strong just like her brother. 5 years passed. The kids had grown, and Anita was ready for marriage. She got married and moved out, leaving James alone with the triplets. James was overwhelmed. He was now bathing the kids, taking them to school, feeding them, and still going to work as a bricklayer. Most days, he took them with him to his worksite and left them at a small kiosk nearby, where he could keep an eye on them. The stress was too much. James looked worn out and tired. He was barely resting. Then help finally came. His landlord's daughter, Saud, who had always had a crush on James, stepped in. She began helping with the children, bathing them, feeding them, taking them to school and bringing them back. She even cooked for James daily. Slowly, James developed feelings for Saud. Saud later inherited her father's compound and became the landlady. She bought a Kiki Napep tricycle for James and told him to stop doing hard labor. Instead, he should start driving the Kiki. Eventually, James married Saud. She opened up to him. She couldn't have children. Her womb and fallopian tubes were removed years ago due to cancer. But she loved the triplets like her own. The triplets, Desmond, David, and Diamond, became her whole world. James drove the Kiki for another 20 years. With it, he paid for the children's school fees, fed his family, and built a new life. Now the triplets are 25 years old. This is where the real story begins. David, Desmond, and Damon grew up to become highly successful men in their respective careers. After completing their education, they quickly secured well-paying jobs and got married. David became a senior manager at a top oil company in Port Harcourt. Desmond rose to the position of director at a thriving microfinance bank in Lagos. Damon owned his own business in Abuja, Damon Group of Companies, known for crafting luxury shoes and bags adorned with diamonds. His brothers held shares in the company, and the business attracted several major investors. Each of the brothers was blessed with a beautiful family. Damon had triplets, 2 girls and a boy. Desmond had a son, and David had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They all lived lavishly, enjoying a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth, comfort, and admiration. On the outside, it seemed like they had everything figured out. But something was terribly wrong. They completely abandoned their father, James, and his wife, Saud. They never called, never sent money, and ignored every message and missed call. Whenever Saud reached out, they dismissed her too. Meanwhile, their father, proud and hopeful, still worked as a Kiki Napep, tricycle driver at the age of 65 just to put food on the table. James would tell neighbors with pride that his sons were doing well and that they took good care of him, but this was far from the truth. Whenever James fell sick, it was Saud who bore the burden. She used the little rent she collected from tenants to buy medicine, and when that wasn't enough, she borrowed money. Sometimes they barely had anything to eat. James became frail, undernourished, and sickly. Years of neglect weighed heavily on him, and he suffered from hypertension, made worse by constant stress and disappointment. His sons rarely, if ever, checked on him, going 1 or even 2 years without a single word. Then one day, James fell seriously ill and couldn't get out of bed. Saud cared for him with local herbs, as she couldn't afford hospital bills. Her tenants hadn't paid rent, and no one was willing to lend her money. Desperate, she called David. He didn't pick up. She called his wife, who said she'd inform him when he returned from work, but she never did. 2 weeks later she tried Desmond. He answered briefly and promised to call back. He never did. When his wife informed him, he dismissed it, claiming his father was only pretending to get their attention. His wife urged him to reconsider, but he refused. Saud eventually called Damon, but his phone was unreachable. He was vacationing abroad with his family. It was Desmond's wife who, concerned and guilty, decided to travel home to see for herself. When she arrived, she found James in a dire state and rushed him to the hospital. But it was too late. James passed away. Before he died, James told Saud not to be angry with the boys. "They are just children," he said with a weak smile. "May their own children never treat them the way they have treated me. I forgive them with all my heart." When the news reached the sons, they were shattered. They wept bitterly, overcome with guilt and regret. They knelt before their father's corpse, begging for forgiveness. They pleaded with God to give them another chance. But peace never returned to their lives. From that day on, they were haunted by nightmares. Rest eluded them. Their wealth could not buy back time, nor could their tears erase their guilt. For the rest of their lives, they lived with the shadow of their father's pain, a burden no success could ever lift. The end.